Welcome, I'm Clint, and this is Swatches Art Livestream 112. On this episode, we're going to be taking a look at Group 1's final illustrations for the Good Omens Art Challenge. Now, this is a fantasy art challenge run by me, where I created the outline of what the participants were having to illustrate, and we will be reviewing them. 2 weeks ago, we took a look at their concepts and gave them feedback. Now we'll look at the finals and give them feedback from here, all in order to just help improve their skills. As I said, I'm Clint. I'm a professional illustrator and art educator, and welcome to the stream. Now I'm just double checking my settings. It looks like everything is green here on the live stream. Let me go ahead and get that out of my way. We'll take a couple of moments and just go through some announcements, let everybody join in live, and then we will jump into the reviews. Looks like we already have quite a few people joining in. Thank you so much, everybody, for taking the time to join in the live stream. Of course, these are always recorded and immediately posted to the channel for later review as well. You have Janos, Squad Gamers, Pipkin, Ariel, Ioma 25, Alexa, Anna, Tyler, Eurostyle, Livia. Good to see everybody. Okay, and we got people from all over the place. Yeah, I'd asked if he let me know. I'm always curious to see where everybody's coming in from. Trinidad, Hungary, California, Colombia. Very cool. Hey. Yeah, thanks for joining in. So, this week, of course, is the finals for Group 1. Next week, we'll be looking at Group 2's finals. If you're not already part of the community, the most active place of the community is over on the Discord. You can find the link below for the Discord channel. And there's a bunch of different rooms out there, some for the art challengers, or if you just wanted to share or find resources or ask people where they find resources. If you're wanting to share artwork in order to get some peer feedback, or if you just want to share artwork and not get feedback and just let people know, hey, this is what I've been working on, just want to share it with you guys, that's a good place for it as well. Carl, good to see you. Tanmay, Talia, Kikoi, good to see you. Okay, well, we have 10 different images to look at this time. Is there any other... No other real announcements to go through. If you do have questions for me, feel free to put them there in the live chat. Just put swatches at the beginning of your comment, so it will flag that in orange for me, and I'll know that it's directed at me. Otherwise, I don't read all of the comments. I'll just assume that you're talking amongst yourselves. If you have any general questions, Anna is probably the one that will be answering them there in the chat. She is the moderator, so listen to what she has to say. And I'm glad you can join in, Anna. Good to see you. Of course, these are a listing of other materials of my teaching and ebooks. I get questions like, well, why do you think about this? Or how would you go about learning such and such? I've covered a lot of the material and subjects on how to learn different things in these sorts of stuff. So if you have questions or want to know what I would teach on a particular topic, I've got things ranging from painting materials, illustration class that goes over there from just start of reading a brief, doing sketches, all the way through the final illustration. I love the topic of lighting and creating mood with lighting. So I've got an ebook on that, colors, composition. I've got a couple of ones that are like the making of something. So I have various ones on like making Liliana, making Jace, making Nissa, all illustrations for magic. I love character design. That's a cool topic. So I got an ebook on that. So a bunch of stuff out there if you want to get information on that. And all that really does go to help just support the channel and make more stuff. Okay, I don't see any questions to kick anything off with, so we will just jump right in. Oh, in case you're unfamiliar, this is the outline that the participants are working from. I am not going to read it all right now, but if you're watching this in a recording, feel free to pause it and read over that yourself. Essentially, they have an option between two different topics, two different images. The winged omen depicting a dream crow, or the other one, good one, circlet, the silver kind of circular diadem sort of thing. And so most of them are of the winged omen topic, but we do have a couple of the circlet illustrations as well. Okay, so we're going to just go alphabetically. Ariel is up first. Now, I have already looked at these and made notes on some of these, and some of them have a moderate paint over of them, and we're going to just be walking through the stuff that I looked at earlier. So this is Ariel saying, having a lot of fun with this. That's always good to hear. Some people get really, really stressed about it and they don't actually enjoy the process. I'm glad you're enjoying it. Implemented your feedback from last week. Very obvious. I think you were listening very intently. Taking it as far as current level would allow. Perhaps I tried too hard, ended up needing to pull back on the level of contrast and sharp detail. I think it turned out decent, eager to learn how to improve it. Now, you mentioned there that you got feedback on Discord. A lot of the guys are making use of the Discord who are in the challenge, and they're putting their process and their progress out there and getting feedback from the other people. That's a really good way to improve because it helps you being able to identify a lot of the blind spots in your image. And yeah, so I'm glad you're doing that. You're willing to put your art out there. So, these are just some quick things that I saw if I were having it in my hands to do something with. A couple of things that stand out to me in no particular order. Ariel, I would start by adjusting the shape of the beak. This, I know, I'm kind of losing the crow shape of the head beak silhouette. It has a particular shape to it. And it's a little more long, a little more pointy. If you kind of see the shape there, I mean, you can see it in the skull. And here we're getting something that is a little, I don't know, it doesn't feel quite right to me. And maybe we're having to play with the shapes for our angle a little bit. But I'm thinking something a bit more like this. Right now, it stays at a similar width and then has a quicker drop off. And I don't think that's quite the crow beak shape. So I would adjust that. Obviously a fairly minor thing to do, but that would help. This I do think is something that needs to be addressed is the eye. What I'm seeing with this is that there's a lot of attention being brought to the eye. There was always attention being brought to the eye because it's the focal point of any face. And you've got like the bloody red coming down from it, and it's this almost perfect, ellipse, but there's really nothing going on there. So it's just black and gray. I would like to see something else, a little more payoff on the eye instead of just kind of a dark spot. You can either just give it a normal eye, and that would be fine. In which case, you're going to have like some highlight and maybe some bounce light on the underside, a little reflectivity to it. Or maybe making it like just a red eye. Or if you're really wanting to go like the eye socket thing, then we need to kind of see some texture of and show that it's an empty socket. Otherwise, yeah, there's just not enough going on there. I mean, before I go on too much further, I want to say excellent progress. I am really pleased with the way that you listened to some of the feedback and how you implemented it. You have obviously put a lot of time into this, and I think that has come along a long way. And I'm very happy with how this has come along and how you've implemented a lot of the stuff that we went over last week. So I want to hit that right off the bat. This other stuff is all a little more nitpicky. Okay, next up. Talking about the anatomy of the bird. Right now, I feel like we're losing a lot of the anatomy through here, the accuracy of that, and it throws me off a little bit. It's like the legs just kind of just stick out from just indiscriminate parts of the body. And we are actually missing. Oh, I made a larger version, yeah. So that's the same crow over here. We're missing like the upper part of the leg where you have the proper feathers around it that make it bigger looking. And then we're going to have that separation there where the body is rounding around and the leg on the opposite side is coming out from that overlap. And that's kind of what I'm looking at here, is that we would actually have the upper part of the leg here on this one. And then, oh, I thought that was my phone. So we have the upper part of the leg on this one, and then it gets skinny. And I guess we could actually delete this here. And then we would have the overlap of the body here, and then we see the upper part of the other leg there, and then it transitions to the skinny part there at the, we'll call it the knee. I'm not sure. And then there are different parts to the body here as well. You have like kind of the separation right here, and then you kind of a separation here, and then you have the feathers there. And so that's what I'd be looking at, maybe implementing that a little bit differently in that anatomy and just tightening up the accuracy on that. So that would be helpful. Personally, I think I would probably drop the red on this part of the sword because it just, the red is very symbolic. It's a very strong color in this image, and it has a lot of meaning with the threads. I would just not want to overuse that on something. So I would personally just let the sword stay in that grayish blue, realm, and let the red be reserved just for that thread and some of the glow in the background. It allows it to be more significant and allows the sword to be less important. So do that. Other things. We are losing the thread in this area a good deal just because the value of the thread is so similar to the value of the background, and it is also getting really thin. And when you get small on the image, if this was to be printed, then that thread is going to be just completely lost in there, which would be very unfortunate. So I would play that up a bit more. I would give a nice brighter red and go ahead and thicken this up so we're not going to lose that. And we don't need to be real literal about the shading on this. Like, it can have a lighter or darker version to it, but we don't need to be like so accurate that it is going to get lost in the background if we get it for a certain value. The main thing here is we're going to keep the clarity, and it's okay if maybe it gets a little bit fatter as it goes down. We just want to keep the legibility of it in the scene. So I would tighten that up with some visual work there. Okay. Yeah, and you can see when that gets smaller, that's still going to have a read to it. I also would not be afraid of making this a little bit thicker as well. Again, this is a major feature of this image, is this thread tying this bird. Now, because this is basically a dream sequence, if you want to think about that, we don't really care what the thread represents or whether it's super realistic, because it literally is like a dream omen symbolizing something. I do like the way that you handled this. Previously, you had just like the 3 going across like that, and it felt a little too structured. This feels like you actually tied the wing, and I think that comes off really well. So I think that way of doing it is much more effective, so I like seeing that. Again, on this one, you could probably double the thickness of it so that it can be visually read from a smaller size. Got a question here from Koi, also a participant. Says, what if there was only one type of ribbon or thread, like either thread or ribbon? Yeah, that's fine too. Um, yeah, maybe you can find a medium size between the two of them. I personally, I would probably do that. I'd probably try to find a medium between the two instead of ribbon or thread. But if you want to have ribbon and thread, then I would leave these being thread, just big enough that you can read them from the small size, but then possibly double the size of the ribbon down here so it's distinct that this is a fat ribbon and that is a piece of thread. And it's going to be very much one or the other, but they're not going to be confused with each other. Yeah. Yeah, anytime that you just type the word swatches, it'll automatically just flag it in orange for me. Yeah. Okay, what else were we looking at? Uh, yeah, I'm always going to be looking for value pairs. And this is something I go over quite a bit in consults when we're looking at somebody's work in order to figure out how to improve it. Now, a value pair is where you have two objects, usually one object overlapping another object. In this case, the bird is overlapping the background, and you want to have differing values for the two elements so that they separate from each other. And through some of this, we're losing that. We have very similar value for the background and the foreground elements. And we're getting some of the same thing down here. Now, most of it is pretty good, but I would look at seeing, is there a way that we can separate that out where we're not getting so much of the gray tone in the background? I would be more prone to kind of go from this red tone and let it go up and shift more into the black without necessarily going through the lighter gray, because that gray is allowing more of the bad value pairs, the same values on the bird as in the background. Then you can just let that kind of transition. Once it cools off a little bit as it moves up in color, or you could let it transition kind of from that dull violet into your gray. And that way you would have more of this tone against that. And that might make that bird pop out a little bit better over on that size. The smoke is kind of nice. You're getting a little movement there. And that seems pretty good. There's all kinds of different patterns with that. I would also be looking at possibly using a little of this influence from your earlier concept for that smoke. Just think that the spiral pattern could actually work here pretty well. And so if you wanted to have kind of the spiral thing going on with the smoke, that would be okay too. You know, you're going to be running with something like that as the smoke is circling in, sort of like you have it there. And it would give a little more purpose to the structure of the background. And I mean, I do that quite a bit, is I try to keep track of what some of my older concepts look like, and then it's fairly common for me to go back and actually utilize some of my earlier ideas and combine it in with my current idea. The other thing to consider would be, as we talked about last week, star fields of like stars and stuff out in space is a good visual connection to dreams. And so if you wanted to add a star field out here, that would also make a lot of sense. And you could just have a bunch of stars out there. Now, the stars don't have to be white. In fact, I probably would not have them white because there'd be too high of contrast and they would compete against the bird. But you could have like violet, like violet stars, and just in the darkest areas, and then the areas that have the smoke, obviously the smoke would obscure it, but that may have a nice visual kind of flair to the image there, and you could just have a couple of them just have a little more visual saturation to them, right, and just let them pop out a bit more than the others. So, and they're just adding one more layer to the visual interest on that. Okay, well, that wraps up my thoughts on this one. Yeah, we're just talking about handling shape of the head a little bit, maybe some other better options for the eye or eye socket. Working with either a star filled or a smoke pattern that would be a little more intentional than kind of the unintentional smoke stuff that's right there right now. Tightening up that anatomy a little bit on the legs, belly area, and just making sure that ribbon is going to pop on the small scale. Otherwise, you're showing a really great control of handling the values as well as the details. All in all, I'm really happy with how this is coming along, and I think it very much hits the mark of what this challenge was about. So, awesome. Thanks so much for participating. Next up is Christian. Okay. Christian says, wanted the background light to be framed in some way like the reference, but didn't quite hit the mark. I'm more invested in the comp than the execution as I'm not that experienced. And then it says notes. These are some of the notes from last time. So yeah, I'm with you. We won't care that much about the rendering of individual little stuff, but more about the concept and the composition as a whole. And this is a reference that I brought up last time as being one to consider with the concept that they had. And so they started following that and combining that kind of with the idea of the angel from Diablo. Yeah. And let's see, my notes here. Okay, hitting on the actual bird first and kind of the way that he's being posed and utilized in the scene. This is this is like a bit too flat for me. So I'd be looking at adjusting some of the shapes there with the wings. It seemed like a lot of the crows, like here, they've got like a big part right there, and then there's kind of two units, two curves to this, and a lot of the different angles. You can see that here as well. Because essentially these, on a lot of birds, what you can find is like, this part is all anchored from one place, and so it does that, and then other feathers are anchored from another spot, so you have this change of angle of the feathers where they work as a unit, but they can kind of slide back and forth over each other. So here I'd be playing into that in order to get a more interesting shape there. This is another one where the shape of the beak is taking us a little too far away from crow. It's almost getting a little more into the parrot sort of shape, particularly in that the lower beak is a good deal larger than the upper beak. It would actually create this large overbite or underbite. Yeah, underbite of the beak. So I'm just adjusting the shape on that, and I'm also would be looking at adjusting the pose of that other wing, because right now that wing is basically covering the shape of the head, and we're going to be losing the clarity of the beak. Now, this is one of those small things to think about when you're posing stuff, but it's the idea of trying to have good silhouettes. And when possible, it's like pull the hands and the digits, hands and feet, arms away from the body so that they aren't hid inside of the shape or the silhouette of the body. And this is pretty much the same sort of thing, that the head is being eclipsed by the shape of this wing behind it. And I think if we could just pull the wing over even a bit more into this region as it pulls back, it would be effective enough to at least give me that part of the beak out from behind. Okay. Yeah, not just bird anatomy, as Janos. I'm going to butcher that name, but that's the closest I'm going to get right now. Yeah, that's exactly it. And if you look at a lot of professional work, you see that they're always trying to keep the limbs of the body out of the silhouette of the body, and that way it's a very clear instant read. To that same sort of point is we're going to get rid of the tree behind the bird, because it really complicates the silhouette of the bird. They have very similar angles to the body as to the tree, and a lot of the limbs are mimicking the same angles as the wings. And so since the tree isn't like a focal point or absolutely necessary, then I would just ditch it. Get rid of that. Past that, what do we do with the rest of the image? Well, leave it as much as possible to remain the same. And that's generally what I do at this stage. Once we get to the finals being entered, like today, I am trying to change the minimal amount in order to get the maximum results. We're not going to be talking about, oh, let's ditch this idea and start a new image and do it this way. No. It's about maximizing what you got. So I did some work on this, and let's step through that. Here we go. So this is my sort of idea. Starting with, we're going to paint out some of that tree. And just the, I could pull up on this. Little too much there, computer. 180. So first up, we're going to paint out that tree, adjust that wing pose, and adjust the shape of this other wing, the stuff we just talked about. I am also adjusting the glow on the eyes so that there's a little more color and not just yellow on black. That could definitely have been one of those things that, as you had more time and refined the execution, you probably would have got to doing that sort of thing, but that was added in as I was doing it. I just thought maybe a mouth glow could be interesting. Nothing other than glows are cool. And if you can add things that glow in the image, I'm usually going to go for that option. And I think a lot of us fantasy illustrators like doing glowy things. It is one of those things that can definitely be overdone. You don't want to have glowy things everywhere, otherwise it loses its power. But I'd probably put it there. Oh yeah, I did end up using that. So this one, I'm just thinking, okay, the Aurora Borealis sort of effect here. What if it was more like, I was almost feeling like it was like a portal. Like there was a portal in the sky, and it's kind of pulling everything up into this thing. And so somehow there's a transition. This bird is like announcing that this portal, something's happening that's going to pull things into it. We don't know what it means, but that's okay. It just has to look significant. So I am doing that. I'm adjusting that so that we can actually see the top part and understand that this is a ring in the sky, and making it a little brighter, and also, you know, glowy little motes of light. So it's not just their normal straight aurora bins of light, but it's going to break off into little motes, right? And so we have more like little wisps of light as well. So that's going up there. That's not the right layer. Delete that over top of him. Yeah. Let's see, what was this? Oh yeah, just some brighter ones. And then looking at just darkening the wings back up, getting that darker. And then you could have like a top light down on him and on the branch as well. I didn't really go into it further than that. I think this could work. I think you could take it this approach. We would need a little more rendering on the bird in order just to help sell the three dimensionality. Right now he's really flat because there's no change of form with the lighting. So it needs to be kind of a top side or bottom side or under light. Some sort of minor fill light needs to be added somewhere on the bird in order to help keep the volume of the forms. But I think that would be a way to take it and have the least amount of changes and get you a good place. So yeah, that would be my input there. Yeah, and this goes for Christian as well as anybody else. Hey, if you go put some of these reworks in or take some of these suggestions, go post it out on the Discord group and let everybody else see what it ended up looking like. In fact, there is a room there on the Discord called Before and After, and that's where we would love to see the concept that was originally submitted and what you ended up with after the final review. And that's, I know that that has been an inspiration to a lot of new people coming in, that they can see the differences between that and the progress made. There we go. We'll wrap it up on Christians. Oh, nope. Let go with that one. Okay, Kong is up next. As says, it's not as far as I might expect. Ultimately, my new job got really in the way of terms of time. Kong, for you and everybody else, real life comes first. So remember, you don't owe me anything other than what you can reasonably do with your time for the art challenge. So you made the right call. Always prioritize your actual work and your family and everything else before the art challenge. Like I said, you can go back and work on these anytime you want. So I took a lot of critiques, quite a few of them, managed to refine the concept. Still looking for advice on to quickly nailing down values and pushing the illustrations further. Okay, sometimes it's just literally throwing more hours at it and going through more variations. But let's take a look at some points here. So with this, we're sticking with the concept, the earlier concept of the crow with the moons in the background, 4 wings, setting on some remains of something, either bones or armor or something like that. And put the star field back there. And yeah, like I said, not a lot of time has been put in, but where would you go from here and how would you handle the values? The most basic way to think about the values, and I'm sure you've heard this before, is to think about foreground, midground, background, and you want a different value range for each one of those. Particularly having like high values, medium values, low values, or full range of values for the foreground, more limited values for the midground, and even less range of values for the background. And this is going to really help the sense of depth. A common mistake is thinking that nighttime or night skies need to be black. And that makes an obvious logic, because if you've ever been outside at night and there's no light, in your area, then the sky is black. But in illustration, you don't often actually do it that way, and we have to use more of like the film approach of, you can make night scenes much brighter than you think they should be, and they will still be accepted as being night scenes. So I would immediately want to raise the value of, or brighten the value of that sky, and let the bird be much darker. Otherwise, we have to brighten the bird up. And it's always a thing of, is the subject going to be lighter than the background or darker than the background? And there always has to be a flip-flop of like darker against lighter against darker against lighter. And each object, it's got a flip-flop, right? Or it's got to be, if you do multiple values, it'd be like a dark against a medium, against a light, against a medium, against a dark. And so you've got to be flip-flopping some way that you're going to keep things clear. I did some work on this one as well. So let me pull that off. In order to work with the values and try to make progress with them, the first thing that I would do is cut out each area and be able to manipulate its values without having to worry about edges or anything. Now, you may have your layers divided up so that you can do it this way, but that's the way that I would do it. And I've already done that over here. So I've separated the skies on one layer, the moons on another, the ground on another, the remaining stuff here, the bat glowy wings on one, the rest of the crow on another one. And then I'm able to just put a layer inside of that layer and adjust the values of each of those independently. And then I can easily make them lighter or darker with adjustments. And that's much faster than having to actually paint the changes in and worry about all the edges. I would probably take it a bit more of this direction so that the bird is distinctly darker. The ground can be darker, that's fine. And the remains being a little bit lighter. And then we have that distinct light to dark pattern on the sky. We're also wanting to have some light to dark on the ground down here, a little artistic option for that in order to try to sell a little bit of depth to it. And this one is honestly going to be affected a lot by the color because you're not going to have a white moon. You're probably going to have like a golden moon, which value-wise is going to be something in this region. But due to the color and the saturation of it, it's going to pop out really well. So if you can find something similar, if you can get the right kind of dynamic going with the values and say this is sort of how I want to separate it out, but then realize that the actual values of the image aren't going to match that, because as soon as you put good saturation into the glowing wings and moons, it's going to be a different value than the black and white version. Also, on the moons, you don't have stars on the other half of the moon, right? Because the moon's actually going to block that's actually moon right there. So you can't have stars inside the shadow side of the moon unless the stars are between you and the moon, which I assume not, because they're stars. So those have been painted out. Yeah. Why couldn't it have a white moon? Because it's colorless and it would be the brightest thing in the scene and it's not the focal point, it would be more useful to have color. You could do more with it. So yeah, I'd be messing with that. And I mean, you can try different versions of it. You can just be like, well, you know, what if I tried that this was much darker? You know, do I like that? Well, the problem here is like, does it have more contrast? Yes. But then you also have black in the foreground, you have black on the character, and you have black in the background. So you just flattened all your layers and all the depth of layers. And there's no distinction between the values of any of the planes, and that's problematic. And that's one of the reasons that we're trying to separate it out and not let the sky go to black. But if you do let the sky go to black, then we have to, you know, start reversing this somehow and like not let the ground be black. And at least there's, now it's like a dark to light as it goes down the image. Yeah, something along that line. That's how I'd kind of go forward with it. If it was maybe a little more progressed, I could say some more with it. But as for now, that's how I'd approach it. And I would go through a number of variations fairly quickly, just doing like, okay, dark to light going this way, dark to light going this way. What if the bird is light in the middle with the top down light on it? And then there's a light spill on the ground, and there's a hard cast shadow. And when you have things separated like this so that you can just throw variations inside of the layer shapes without having to select stuff, that's a very fast way to go through a lot of variations. And then you can just, copy and paste them onto a collage and just look at several of them together. Well, I hope you found that helpful, and of course, you keep working on it, post it out there. I'd love to see what you end up doing with it. Jenny is up next. Didn't have time to experiment with the portal or window and come up with more interesting ideas. Do you have any tips on how I can tell when a painting is finished or whether it still needs rendering? Well, I'll tell you right now, Jenny, that this has a really nice visual polish on it. And it's obvious that you put in a considerable amount of time and attention into getting this to be a very, just a very well executed piece. Everything has been given attention and been cleaned up and is handled in a very purposeful manner. You've really looked at the patterning on the feathers, on the wings, the way that it would ripple and overlap. And it is really good to see that. That is a professional handling of that subject. And I am really liking how you handled all of that. It's very, very beautiful. It has a distinct, almost like watercolor colored pencil combination sort of look to it. And I mean, if you feel fairly good with that approach, I'd say stick with it. Whatever sort of approach you use to get that look, it's a very nice look. And yeah, I'd say stay with it if you're happy with that sort of execution. So, in my other course, I have a little thing about your question, which is, it may be considered finished when you're out of time. Adding more would overwork it and lower its energy. It says everything it needs to say, or more would be superfluous and less would be inadequate. If you're working on a professional image and you run out of time, well, it's finished. I don't care if you wanted to do more, or there maybe more that could be done. If you're out of time, you're out of time, and therefore it's finished, and you move on to your next piece. The other thing is, when you start looking at, the second one there and the last one kind of goes together, which is adding more would overwork it. If you keep just sitting there and kind of noodling on the image and adjusting this or adjusting that, if it's not actually accomplishing anything, and if it's actually lowering the energy of the image because it had a freshness and it had an energy earlier, but now it keeps getting less the more you work on it, then just stop. Just stop. Oh wow, we got some awesome donations here in the chat. Solid Spider Snake with 10. Yorkie with 20. Thanks so much, guys. I appreciate you supporting the channel. I'm glad that you're enjoying the feedback. Thanks so much. Yeah, if you guys give a little love to Solid Spider Snake and Yorkie. Thanks so much, guys. It says everything that it needs to say. And that, I think, is a really important one, because what was this piece about? What was asked of this image? What is it trying to accomplish? What does it need to convey? Is it conveying that stuff? Okay, then kind of like, shut up. You said what needed to be said, so move on. The last one would be superfluous and inadequate. If you add any more, is it actually moving the meter? Is it superfluous? Like if I add an extra star, is that star really superfluous? Or if that star is not there, is it going to be inadequate? And so you're trying to find that balance. I think that you're pretty much near there. Another one that's not listed on there that I think is a good kind of indicator is, has everything received attention? And that is, have you gone to everything in the image and just made sure that it had some attention? It was cleaned up, it was sharp, whatever needed to be done to that area. Did you define it? Did you clarify it? Did you soften it out? Everything, you just need to work around the image and make sure everything has received some attention from the concept or the sketch stage. In this case, everything looked like it has received attention. So, I'm good on that one. I do have a couple of recommendations, a couple of small things in order just to maybe punch it up a little bit. But largely speaking, I think you ought to be very happy with this, and it's a very beautiful piece. A lot of these cording is getting lost. A very similar thing to the ribbon on that first image, where if I'm looking at it like this, it's not a problem. I can see them, I can make them out. But I get it small and I just lose them. Now, they're not super important. If I can't read them really well, it's not that big of a deal. But still, I would prefer for them to be a little more visible. And so I would look to just punch them up a little bit. Maybe doubling the thickness over there, and just letting it stand out from that shadow a bit more. It doesn't have to be like bright orange, it doesn't need to be like this. But I do need to separate it out enough so that if it's printed, that you're not going to lose it. Because you're always going to lose a little bit of the contrast and a little bit of the color in the printing process. So always assume that it's going to be like 10% less contrasting and 10% duller in color than what you see on your screen. And I find that rule of thumb to be helpful in how to just overstate things a little bit in order to help the rendering process. Now, what you did down here, I like some of this decision, which is some of it is being lit and it stands out because it's lighter than the starscape. But then on the brighter part of the starscape, you're letting it stand out because it's darker. You're letting it work as a silhouette. I love that call. A lot of people don't think about using that. But still, I would probably double the thickness just so it doesn't end up being like this 1 pixel wide line on a printed size. And letting that go from dark to light. Yeah. Okay, next up, small stuff. With the eye, again, this is one of those, if I'm looking at it from a distance, there's a couple of things that are going on here. One is that this is a very bright background. Go back to my brush. And we're showing that the nostril is just bone and you can see through it. But yet, it is also a very similar shape and very similar value to the eye. And so when you're looking at it on small, it makes me think, oh, is there a hole in the head? Is the eye, can we see the background through the eye hole? And I don't think that's the intention. We don't want that confusion. So I'd say if we want to keep the white eye, which I'm completely good with, I would let it shade down a bit so it's not quite on the same value level, or at least put it on the cooler range so that you don't accidentally mistake it for a hole the same way as the nostril. So smaller thing, just a little smaller thing there. Yep. I would personally also look to use a little mid-tone to separate the high contrast to the head against the background. Some of this I would find to be just unusually hard edge. And I would want to convey that the feathers have a little softness to them. And I would do that by just coming along here and just making sure that there is some mid-tone between that bright background. And you can kind of think about it as like you sort of have it here. It's almost like a little visual halo where there's light coming into your eye, right? And it's kind of flickering around the edge of this thing that's being backlit. I'd get rid of that. Yeah. And I would just let there be a little mid-tone around this, especially around this nostril. Because it's a really, really high contrast, small, sharp shape that isn't actually a focal point. So I'm trying to find a way to just soften it out a little bit so that it's not serving as a focal point. Small thing there, maybe just a little bit on there. Yeah, I feel like that's maybe just a little bit better. I would also consider, and I would have to play with this. I don't know offhand if this is the right call. It would take a little work, but I would consider letting the bones get darker, and they may not be affected by this inner window light the way that you currently have it. I would consider letting them get darker than the window scene. And they can get a little bit lighter, but basically they're being backlit into more of a silhouette situation. And it makes the window pop just a little more. And that way you're not having white bone over basically a light source back there, where now you're getting a lot of light on light and trying to make it pop out. So we can just come around all of this and just let it do this. And we can also keep the bone a little more to the cool side than this, because it's very much to the warm side. And that'll help separate them as well. That'll be something like that. And you could also add some sort of other, if you need a separating light source on this side, you could have like some sort of cool underlight, side light to some of these. And that way you can still tell some of the form, and they're not going to be kind of formless, because we're not utilizing this light source on them as much anymore. So we could just have some sort of ambient, cool starlight sort of affecting some of this. Takes it a little bit of different direction. Sorry, my cat was in here just earlier, and I feel like I have cat hair all over my nose. Itchy. So yeah, I don't have that much to say here. I'm really pleased with this. I think you ought to be pleased with this image. It's a lovely piece. I think it does well to fulfill the challenge, and I look forward to you joining more challenges and being a part of the community going forwards. Kikoi. Okay, been a challenging one, but I hope it's ended up following the brief more than it was the first crit. Not sure if the regular crow looks too nice, or if the whole image is too happy. I don't think that's the problem. No, it's not happy. Would love any feedback you have, especially how to make the image have more depth. Now I know Kikoi's in here. Yeah. Yeah, see? Anna likes it, so you're doing okay. Thanks so much again. Learn a ton from the crits. Yeah, now I know being out on the Discord, Kokoi has really been utilizing the feedback there from the group and really listening to it, taking to heart a lot of the comments. And, I gotta tell you, you have been working your butt off on this image. And I think back to like the Warcraft image. You worked your butt off on that Warcraft image. Uh, I am I am proud of you. I am proud of how hard you push. I don't know there's only anyone in the community that does these art challenges that pushes as hard as you do. For the sheer fact that you are willing to just scrap a direction and restart and give everything you've got and stay up late and get feedback and utilize that feedback. It is really a great thing to see, and that's why you're going to make it somewhere, and that's why I see so much improvement from where you were a year ago or 2 years ago. So yeah, yeah, it's good to see. I'm proud of you. So with this one, I think this is a much stronger image than the initial concept. It has a lot better balance between kind of the strange ghostliness. The original version was maybe, yeah, it was bordering more on that horror side. Not getting that here. I look at it, I don't really understand what's going on, but I'm okay with it. Right? That's one of the things about this particular challenge is it's okay if it's not completely understood, but it has to be done in the right way, right? So how do we push it further? Um, Again, keeping as much as we can, keeping the direction that we've got. There's a couple of things that stand out to me. Number one, no, I'm not worried about it being too happy. Um, it's okay if it has some color, it has some glow, and that sort of thing. Uh, the eye placement seems off to me. That would be one of the first things that I would adjust on the main crow. When I'm looking at these, I feel like the eye is a little bit higher up. Yeah, particularly like on this guy. I feel like the eye is a little further up, from the back of the beak, and a little more forwards than what we have right now. So I'd push that forwards and push it up just a little bit. Now I did some work on this earlier, so I'll show you what that looks like. I also do not know what it is. Yeah, you don't know what the image is either, but that's okay. Okay, other things would be depth. I would be going back to some of your ideas here where you were playing around with having like more trees in the background. That would be my initial thought as well, of just adding another visual plane of, okay, so we've got this foreground one, which we'll call foreground. We'll call this midground, and then we need another branch or something in the background that will serve as background plane and help build those out. In most cases, you do want the three planes. Not in every case, but it is a good rule of thumb to follow. Next would be just handling some of the lighting and the colors a little bit. This is a place where I would go ahead and let this beak get darker and go with more of a black beak, because it would make a much cleaner silhouette, where the value pair here and the value pair here are very similar. They're different colors, but it's one of those cases where when you pull out, the beak sort of gets lost into that similar tone in the background. But if we can treat this as a unit, then this is a much more readable silhouette from a small size. And it also just keeps it simple, like this is the dark one and this is the light one. Whereas we don't have that, we kind of have like light, dark, light thing going on. So, Struggled with the background branches, making it confusing. Would you consider making them very desaturated? Uh, yes and no. I'll show you kind of how I'd approach it. So first thing is just moving the eye. I'll just flip that on and off and kind of see the difference there. I feel like that's perhaps a better placement for the eye. I literally just copied it, pasted it, and moved it over. So quick change. And then I did some painting. So main things that I'm looking at here. I'm wanting to create a gradient to the limbs, where right now the limbs are staying mono value, right? They're one value across the whole thing. It stays basically the same color and the same value all the way across all of the limbs. And we want to change that up. We want everything is a gradient. Everything is getting lighter, darker, warmer, or cooler, or more saturated or less saturated. And that keeps the eye moving around the scene. So here I'm looking at letting that value get brighter, but I'm also letting it actually shift into the violets from blues. And it's actually getting a little more saturated as it moves up to offset the fact that it's getting lighter. And this allows there to be a dark shape with the head that's not being competed against by the branch in the background, right? You know, this is one of those things that we're not redesigning the image at all. All the limbs are exactly where the limbs were. The design of the limbs is the same, using the same color palettes that are already established in the image. We're utilizing them in a little different recipe, right? So that same sort of thing going on over here. Now this one, I'm going to go ahead and let this foreground one go dark so that he serves more as a silhouette against the values and the brighter colors there in the bird. And I'm also wanting to help promote more of a sense of volume and roundness to the bird. This is another place where we're getting the mono value, right? So it's basically the same value from the bottom to the top, which makes it feel very flat. There's no discernible curvature to the volume. So I'm going to introduce just a little top light, minor top light, just so that like the top plane is a little bit lighter and then it gets darker on the bottom side, right? And basically looking at the same shape here, like none of this top side is very bright, but it is a little bit brighter than the bottom side. So just developing that point right there. Can't remember what was on. Oh yeah, so I literally just used like the magic wand tool and selected the branch and then pasted the branch back there and set it to a darkened layer and just moved the value up. And that would be, I would finesse it a little bit. I would massage it a little bit into the scene from that point. I was just doing the fast and dirty version. But that's kind of how I'd approach it. Just so that it's 30% value and visual of the other branches. And I'm also making sure that they are staying fairly saturated and they're not just graying out the background. Looks so much more 3D with the background and crow's head. Really nice. Yeah, good. Yeah, that's the idea. We just want to develop that form a little bit and make sure we're not losing the volumes. So yeah, just a little branch on each side and trying to keep the branches away from basically the head space to keep that head having a simpler background around it helps it stand out better. Then more of the branches can fill the other remaining area in the background. I also adjusted the eye a little bit so that it's picking up some of the color from the ghost version, right? And made the ring around the eye a little less precise, right? a little more uneven, and move the highlight to the front so it would just be backloaded with all the lights on the eye on one side. The only other thing I would really think to do would be, hey, it looks like you have, honestly, it looks like it could be snow, which I think could be cool. Maybe you want them to be stars. I don't know. But I think snow could be cool. So I would consider doing like a snow pass. And just throwing some snow onto the branches. It didn't have to be a major amount. You don't need icicles hanging down everywhere. But if we're going to have like some snowflakes coming down, then we could put some snow on the branches, and it would just be a nice visual element to the scene. And yeah, I'd be very happy with this. I think that you've handled the magic-y effect of the bird coming out of the bird. It's working well. You've got a good range of colors in there, but not too wide of a range, because you've got like the violets, and you've got the blues, and you've got like the deeper navy blues. And so yeah, it just comes all together really well. And yeah, like I'll usually say, is just how can we take it the next step from where it is with the minimum changes necessary. Okay, well, thank you so much, Akoi, and yeah, please, any final changes you make, then toss it up on the Discord. I personally love seeing where people take it, and I think it is encouragement to other people to see what happens to the images after the live streams. Best wishes with that, and moving on to the next one. Luca. Okay. This is another one of somebody really ditching an idea, going with a new one, running with it until they either can or can't do something with it, and then going forwards again. Had to go through a bunch of different versions. Wasn't feeling too good about this after last times, even after reworking it. The closest thing, if you didn't see last times, it was similar to this. Yeah. I'm not completely satisfied with this result, even though I learned a lot. I think this piece doesn't have a clear enough values. I'd agree with you. It's a little muddy with the value scheme. So that's a good observation. They don't set a clear mood. I would agree. Yeah, especially the top part of the crow. You don't know if it needs the top light. And you can go either way depending on how you handle the rest of the scene. We'll look at it. I think the idea of illuminated stone is cool. But wonder how I'd render it. Hope I get to do another challenge. Well, yeah, I hope you do too. And yeah, so we've gone through a couple of different ideas. We had like the crow with eyes all in its wings. But I guess you weren't really feeling that, couldn't sell that right. So you moved to this one. I saw that one out on the Discord. And thought it felt too much like a character. Yeah, because that was a conversation we had about a different piece last week. Is when it moves from being a creature to a character, that's got to... There's a change there you have to be really careful with, because on a lot of projects, there's a really clear distinction between creatures and characters, and you got to be careful where that line is, and you're not walking across that line. Though the smoke was cool. Yeah, I'm with you. I think this is a really nice visual element of like smoke coming up and out of something, and it's illuminated with some light. I'm all on board with that sort of idea. But then we kind of switch it up. And so with this version, we've got similar pose and stuff going on with the crow, but now we've got stones and some smoke around the stones. We've got a cloth down here, and we've got like some light on a stone down here. Now, like I said earlier, we all like glowy stuff, but this feels like it's too small and it's too insignificant. It's way just on the bottom quarter, tiny piece of the image. And you've got like all this attention going down there. Everything's kind of funneling to this thing, but half of it's covered up and it's right on the corner of the image. So I would say let's try to find something else. Unless you like moved everything up and you had more room for the stone and you could utilize the lighting of the stone more predominantly in the image, I would say that we'd need to move on to a different idea. There is a lot of ways you could take this, and I actually sit down here and I messed with it for a while. There isn't one answer here, and because you could do everything from, you could turn these into headstones, like if you wanted to create, some sort of graveyard scene, but they would need to clearly be headstones. Right now they're just pointy stones, but they would need to clearly be headstones, and maybe you have some sort of shapes to them that make them feel more man-made, right? I mean, if you want to do like the cross thing, or whether you want to do one that has like a hole in it, like old Saxon style or something. And that's not a bad symbology to have like headstones and having smoke going through them. I mean, that's kind of cool. I grabbed onto one idea. It's not necessarily the only idea, but I grabbed on to an idea and I kind of worked that up just to have something to show you. I thought this was kind of interesting. I took this as like a scroll, right? At first I thought it was fabric because it's hanging very, like it's heavier than paper. And so I thought it was like some sort of tabard or something. But if we could make it like a scroll and make it have more energy to it, then I'll say, okay, let's do that. So I sort of grabbed this idea and, I'm going with something like this. So first thing I want to do is, okay, the glowy stone thing isn't going to work unless we completely redesign the stone and recompose the scene. So painting that out, and then if we're not going to be utilizing the stones as the major elements, we're going to go back to the parchment thing. So painting out the major ones that are affecting him, and then letting these things be more energetic, letting them be energy, letting them be like the whipping around in the wind, or whether they're being controlled by magic, and it's like these things are just almost attacking the crow, right? He's being wrapped up in this parchment, and maybe it's like being consumed by arcane knowledge, or that you don't know what it means in the game, but something on that line, and you put just a little writing on it, and the writing can't be too dark, or otherwise it'll break up the values. But yeah, that sort of idea is like, now the bird he's almost like trying to protect himself from this stuff, and he's got a really simple silhouette that you can read, but it's all of this that becomes very chaotic. Right, and so that's the storm of paper and scroll that are kind of whipping around. And you don't know really what's going on and what it symbolizes, but maybe it's a good direction. You could also play with like some underlighting if you're wanting to throw in some other color into the scene. You could add like some sort of underlight to this. Right, and maybe that's not bad. One of the issues I think is like the tail feathers need to be there, but there are also a black head with a black beak against black tail feathers in the shadow, and so we really, really lose a lot of the clarity down there. You could have it like the tail is being underlit, right? more so than the rest of it, and that way you can actually let the you can let this light back here kind of tell what is going on in that way, and it helps separate some of that stuff out. Yeah. And you're looking for like really interesting ways to let this be whipping around. It could be like even the foreground ones are much closer to camera, right? And even doing something like this, right? And letting them be doing that. And if you do this, you also want to make sure that you're having a lot of this stuff going on where it's whipping around and it's twisting. A lot of times a novice will just keep it the same the whole way. But I would be trying to add in plenty of little twists to it as it's going. Yeah. I was playing with like maybe some sort of background light to it. So if you want to throw some almost like magic effect sort of thing. But that it could be done well, but it could also get very complicated very quickly. Because, again, we're looking at the value pairs of now that's going to be making everything very similar values. And you'd have to play with it, you know. So I think you could definitely get it to work like this. This is one of those cases where the top-down light may be very effective. You probably want a nice, strong top-down light on this area. Or you don't have it and you go with the underlight to help. One way or the other, you need kind of a stronger light or color in order to just give it some more pop. Yeah. So that's how I would kind of approach it. I know this is kind of taking your image a whole different direction, Luca. And if you want to do it that way, feel free. I mean, love to do that. But sometimes it's kind of just find something that's sort of working, that's sort of interesting, and then we have to really run with it. And so if you want to do stones, if you want a glowing stone, then do the glowing stone, but give it more space in the scene. Whatever symbol is on it needs to have some sort of significance. Can we repeat that pattern throughout the rest of the scene somewhere? Can the smoke be pouring off of the column? You know, can all the smoke be like pouring off of it, and maybe the light's coming through the smoke as it curls around tombstones or something? Yeah. Swatches, could you show the blue, black, and the red together? Oh yeah, sure, I'll pop those on. Yeah, so that would be the combination with the two different ones at the same time. I think you need to choose one or the other, unless like the red under one is less. Now, if you set that one down just so that it's a little bit of a fill light and not a major light, then you might be able to do that and then have this one. But you could also just go through and play around with what color works well for the I would say the spell light, whatever effect is taking place. Okay, well there you go. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that. Next up we have Melanie. Okay, Melanie, first one up that we're seeing the good one, circlet. Last time we looked at it was right in, I think it was this version over here. So excellent progress. So my concept didn't age too well, mainly because I misjudged the time needed. Unforeseen events. Hope this is still to work on. Absolutely. Yeah, you do whatever you can. Life comes first. Trying my best to evolve the concept into a painting. I think it's coming along very nicely. It still needs some work. It still needs to be cleaned up and stuff needs to be defined. But largely speaking, it's going in a very good direction. Besides working with the details, I also fear that the design does not read too well in the front and middle of the circlet in terms of values. I would agree. I'm always going to err to, can we get it to read just a little bit better? Yes, but you're picking up on that. That's good. In general, the value's all over the place and something that I would want to invest more time into. Okay. So on this one, I am really loving. It's a very positive scene because this circlet, the idea is that it is a thing that kind of grants like wisdom and insight and influence, right? And uh, and that's completely coming through here. And the sense of it floating is very nice. The sense of depth that the foreground is, you can make out what you see here, but we completely lose it in the background. That's fine. I'm liking that. Most of the form is coming across pretty well as far as the 3D, design of this. I mean, anyone who's never tried to do something like this, it is a real pain to try to do a design like this in 3D. Like to sketch it out in curvature. Because like this piece right here can just about melt your brain. The way that that is twisting along multiple axes at the same time. So I applaud that. I think that we lose it a little bit here. Well, I think that is perhaps a little too far off this side. I would pull this over a bit more. So that would be one of my small things would be, I think we need to pull this over this way a little bit. It was a nightmare. Big true. Yeah, absolutely. So where do we go from here? Okay, a couple of things. First is I would crop in about to where you see these lines right here. Not very much, 10%. Just so that we make sure that those little thin lines are as fat as possible on the card size. As you probably intend to do, this needs to be defined some more down here. We need to go in, define a couple of flowers in more detail. I would also utilize some of the leaves in order to break the shapes a little bit and just cause a little overlapping with some of the leaves and some of the flowers. So it's not just a series of ovals on ovals on ovals, right? We'll break it up with some of those leaves there. Then what else can we do? I would adjust the background so that in general it's a little cooler than the foreground. So I would shift the colors in generally this area to be a little bit more to the cool side, possibly a little less saturated, and then let it basically get warmer there in the foreground. And then I would look at some of this, like this section right here, I'd let that just work more in silhouette. And maybe that's not technically accurate with the way that the lighting works and stuff, but if we're not going to have a good value pair there, I would just push it to one side or the other. So first thing is just doing a repose on the cropping. Just cropping in, like I said, about that 10% there. And that's still fine. We still have some breathing room on it, but next up is just working with the background. We're doing a little silhouette on that one so that it stands out. I'm also adjusting the light a little further back here so that we have some light behind that shaded part. I'm also simplifying stuff in the shadow area more. There's going to be a lot more detail and definition in the lit areas and a lot less in the shadows. So I'd be pulling them down. I'm also trying to visually simplify the area around that crystal, that diamond, so that it pops out visually more. It has less to compete against right next to it. I'd be doing that. Just some cursory leaves and cast shadows. Don't forget about cast shadows on other flowers in order to help make them pop out a little bit. Then the background, shifting that, getting that more to a cooler side, so we have some value change there. We're also letting the darkest part get a little bit lighter, and adding some I would consider adding a little gleam to some of the highlights and the diamonds on this thing. It is a magical artifact, and so if it has a little extra bling to it, that would be okay. What Photoshop maneuver do you suggest to add or change color? To add color or change value to a rendered scene? Well, it depends whether you're adding color or changing value, because you would do something very different. I mean, if you're just adjusting color, you can just use a color layer. If you're trying to mimic a light on it, then I would use a linear light layer. I mean, a linear dodge layer. If you're needing to adjust the value, and the color, yeah, see, each one depends the situation. I'm usually using linear dodge, multiply, normal, or hard light. Yeah, it depends the situation. So this is sort of direction I'm going to go with it. No major changes. Just pulling a little bit more, adding more of the cool tones in the background so the warm tones pop a little bit more. Getting a little simpler information around the diamond at the bottom. I would tweak the shape just a little bit more, just a little more attention to see if you can adjust the construction for the perspective a little better. Oh yeah, this was the last thing, is adding maybe a little darker there, and then yeah, what about some petals falling down? Yeah, and we got a bunch of flowers there. It'll give a sense of, I don't know, movement, some visual pops of color here or there to break up the kind of the monotony. It's one of those things that it wouldn't be in the outline. It probably wouldn't say, oh, and those flower petals falling down in the scene. But it's certainly one of those things that would probably be acceptable if it added the right, feeling to the image. So, yeah, some flower petals. And I'm just looking at maybe darkening up some of this, so some of it reads a little bit better. That part maybe. Yeah, that would kind of. Oh, I can pull up. That would kind of be a before and after. Yeah. So, yeah, very very happy with what you've been doing with this, Melanie. I hope that you find some time in the future, pretty soon, to jump back into it and get some more work on it, and post it out there when you're finished. Meteor Skies is up next with our other circlet image. This is leftover comments from the first time, so we won't read that. And yeah, this is when I think you developed the flowers very nicely. I glanced at it. I know that they're flowers, but they're also not obtrusive, and that's one of the things that could easily be done as they become overwhelming in the image, that there's too much tight detail, and I think that you've handled it quite well with that. So on this one, my main concern is the circlet feels very very gray, and if we actually look at one of the things that Melanie did quite well here is that utilizing the colors of the environment on the silver. So basically just that dark kind of between the light and the bounce light is the darker sort of innate color of the silver, but everything else utilizes the colors of the scene. And that's what I would actually push with this one, is instead of just being gray, can we start adding color into the circlet? Maybe the upward facing stuff is more warm and the, shadowed stuff is more cool. Can it be picking up some of the peachy tones from the flowers around it? And I think that would make it feel more shiny and also kind of put it in the scene more because it's reacting to the environment. I think part of the problem is we've got very light flowers with, again, a light object. So I would consider not letting the flowers be so white by nature, but that they would be just a little bit darker. And so sorry, getting a spam call. I would consider adding, this is a gradient map that is just going to throw some color on there and make the flowers more, peachy pink. And then I'm using a hard light layer just to throw color on there real fast. But just trying to throw some color onto the circlet so that it's not just gray, because gray is very dull. We're trying to make it more magical, more shiny than that. So throwing some of that on there, tinting it with a bunch of color. And a hard light's a good one for that because hard light will carry with it a lot of saturation. And so if you're wanting to add a lot of color into something and also be able to change the value some, hard light's a good option. The next is a linear dodge, and obviously this is fast, quick and dirty changes. Trying to get a little more sheen and pop out of some of this area, bringing back some pops of highlights and stuff back in this area. And then for the environment, not a lot of change here. I'd maybe utilize a few more leaves to break up different patterns. Utilize just a little more light back here behind this part of the circlet for that to stand out a little better. Taking down the value of the darkest part over here so the circlet doesn't have as much to compete against. So doing that sort of thing. And that's kind of what I'm thinking. If you want to keep the flowers lighter, that's fine. But see what color you can add into the circlet so that it's not going to be as gray. And also see about adding some more sheen, particularly some highlights on the upward parts of some of this area. And that would be really nice. So, yeah, I think very well. You did really, really nicely with the flowers and your rendering of those. I didn't put it in here, but one thing I thought is like if you had a few of the, I think I mentioned it like on last week, something like a baby's breath. That if I'm thinking of the right flower, they're like has like a stem. And it has like little white flowers down along it. And I would consider maybe adding some of those to kind of break up the very similar tones of the other flowers. And there would just be a couple of them that would have like the baby's breath, just kind of the white to break it up. And maybe you could have a little overlapping of one kind of coming up through the inside there. And maybe you have one right here in the foreground. Right, and then maybe one kind of laying across this way. Maybe one back behind on the other side of that one. And that would be something I'd think about using to just break that up a little bit. Probably one, that's coming right down the middle. Maybe one in the background back here or something. Probably one like right through here. So, yeah, just giving you a third option besides just circlet and flower. Okay, that will wrap it up on that one. Meteor Skies, thanks so much for joining in. this challenge. Travis Earls is up next. Travis says, I ultimately don't like where this ended up. Realized that too late to go back to the drawing board. Yeah, sometimes that be the case. And we either have to ditch it or power through it somehow. So, yeah, I agree with you. I think where you were at originally, I guess you decided to go with, like, the light version of the bird instead of the dark. You did stay with the pathway leading into the back of the cave. But I think you probably got overwhelmed with how to do like a ghosty shape. With that, the thing I would bring to mind is you can still be very precise about it. It can still have good anatomy. It can still be very clear what you're seeing without having to go back to, let's just use a big soft airbrush in order to try to convey a ghost and light source. So, you know, one of the things that I would consider is like, this is a League of Legends, new character, League of Legends, Gwen. She has this magical scissor that is her weapon. And giant scissor that she uses to fight with. And, you know, unlike this is I'd say ghost scissor, but we recognize it as both being ghostly, but also have a solidness to it. It's very clear the shape, it's very clear the forms, and it's very clear that it's some sort of manifestation of light. And I would see about going a bit more that direction. And over here, this is, I forget which character this is, League of Legends as well. But you got like this dragon in the background, right? And it could be that sort of approach too, where you're primarily utilizing the edges to create a glowing effect. And a lot of the stuff in the middle is where it is more transparent. And that way it's a lot like painting glass. Because glass is primarily visible. I don't have a glass up here to hold up. Glass is primarily visible through the edges. The center is the part that you can see through. So a lot of ghost shapes are done that way. It's kind of like doing the inverse. So instead of shading the edges to make them dark, you're brightening them and leaving the middle unshaded. So that's the way that I would approach it. Which is what I did, again, quick and dirty, painting out the airbrushy version and just kind of quickly establishing, you know, where things are from there. I thought about adding another pop of color. I liked the red under the walkway, but it's like, okay, let's lean into it. If we're gonna have red on the walkway, boom. We've got this weird dreamlike red glow coming up from the bottom of this thing. I'm much more dynamic this way. Okay. So what I did is I grabbed this guy right here, and then I just copied and pasted him and inverted the values and adjusted them after inverting them. And then I set it to linear dodge. So, I mean, obviously you can draw this, but I wasn't taking the time to do this. I was just doing the fast, dirty way. So that gave me this. Now, I could still, this is a good basis to work from. I added some glowy stuff to it, like wispy stuff to it, and then some adjustments to the eyes and the values and stuff. So, you know, we can kind of go this direction with it. I would still, you know, if I glanced at this, I would think, oh, this is some sort of ghost apparition bird. That is a light source. It's lighting the steps that it's standing on, but it's also still very clear what I'm looking at. And taking some influence from some other illustrations that have like glowy effects like that. So we're getting a clear light to dark, getting the background darker at the back of the bridge, back in the tunnel there, letting that red really pop out from that, letting the bird's color stay kind of in the vicinity as you had it. And you can, like, you know, move this, and it depends how much of it is kind of see-through and how much is not. If you want to keep working with it, I think that it can still work this way. And I would utilize this sort of approach to it. Another thing is to be looking at, again, everything is a gradient. So the background is going from more lit to more shadowed. So we're doing the opposite with the pathway. It's going from shadowed in the foreground to lit in the background. And that way you always have contrasting values to pop out from each other. And just the red to the green is kind of a nice combination. You don't necessarily have to have the red in the background. You could just have it on the steps, and that could work as well too. But if you did want some glow, you could do that. Or if you wanted there to be like embers coming off of the bridge or something, that could be cool too. And that would give a little motes of, you know, color over the green stuff. Yeah, so Travis, you know, don't despair. One of the best things that you actually can do is to get concepts that aren't working very well and just push them. Even if they're never going to be great, just learning how to get even a difficult concept and getting the most that you can out of it by going back and just utilizing good fundamentals, good values, good color combinations. That is a really, really important skill, because when you get to working on different pieces, not every piece is going to be just the most awesome piece you've ever done. Not every piece you're going to have that lightning strike idea that is going to make it work really well. Some pieces just are not going to click very well, but you still have to do them the best that you can. And getting used to, how do I take, I'm going to say a mediocre concept and make it as good as possible. Happens all the time in illustration. Okay, last one I'm going to be looking up is Tyler Vale. Tyler, I can't remember, is Tyler in the chat? Probably. He usually is. I see Vale SV. Is that you? Is that somebody else? I don't know. Okay, so I added these up here. Tyler did, yeah, okay, there he is. He did not have these. I added these because I was going to talk something about them. I feel like this is close to the MTG level illustration that he can get to, but not quite there, so anything we can do to push it further. Okay, Tyler, yeah, developing this pretty much kept it in line with what the concept was. So no major changes to the direction of the image, the subject matter, that sort of thing. But again, keeping this as much the same as possible, how do we just push it up? So these are images for MTG, right up here from different people. This is Dan Dos Santos, usually works in oils or acrylics? Traditional painting. I can't remember which one. Lovely piece. This is Alex Konstad. Love his work. Very nice work there. Chris Ron, he works in oils. It's one of his pieces. So if we're going to try to meet that sort of level, what do we need to do with it? Well, a couple of things that I'm looking at is that the whole scene is really hot, and maybe that's okay, because like all of this scene is very cool, so you could have an analogous scene where everything is hot. One of the problems I'm having is this is so bright through this whole area, and it's not the focal point. Over here we have a really nice, cool, warm dynamic where most of the scene is cool and you have that discordant warm that's standing out. Over here we have the warm background, but everything in shadow is cool. Again, a nice, cool, warm dynamic. We even have that some in this one where the silhouette is still really striking against that background. And it's got some of that going on. But one of the things I want to draw your attention to is because this creature is not receiving any direct light, because it's being backlit, it's not being lit from this side, that the contrast on it goes way down. Now, Alex does that on his piece here. See, this side of the character is not receiving any strong direct light, which means that the contrast of light and shadow goes way down. Basically, things will flatten down to their base tones. And basically, the only light and shadow you have here is occlusion shadows. It's the shadows up underneath things where the light is just occluded from getting there because, you know, an object is in the way. And over here, what we're having is like very distinct light and dark and high contrast on a lot of this for something that's not receiving any light. And so I would find that the concepts are, the contrast is too high, and visually it just creates more visual noise than is needing to be there. So that would be an issue. I also feel like a lot of this is just getting too messy. You just don't see a lot of MTG images that messy. Things are just clarified more than that. Like some of this is not super defined. A lot of that is not super defined, but it's not defined in a very purposeful manner. Right? It's foggy and limited values, but it's not defined in a very controlled way. Same thing with the background here. Like this is not sharp and detailed in a very clear way. And this isn't. This is just kind of messy. So I would see about trying to make that more controlled, smooth. Depends how you want to say it. Okay, so I did some work on this one too. What I was looking at is either I would consider making the background cooler so that the warmth of the bird stands out against it, or letting the background be generally warmer and letting the crow get a little cooler in the shadows, or dropping down the darks, making the background not have as dark of darks or as bright of brights, so that there's more contrast in the bird than there is in the background. So starting with that, this would be a first step. Then I'm trying to bring a little more nuance and a little more neutral colors into the background. And that way I feel like the bird stands out, because there's a common way that things are handled, and there is a more experienced ways to handle them. The common way is, if the character is being lit, then I need to show what's creating that light. I need to show the light source, which is what we have right here. But you don't always need to do that. Sometimes you can just show that the thing is being lit and assume that the light source is out of frame. And I'm going to do that because it allows me to have the brightest thing in the image on the character, instead of allowing the brightest thing in the image to be the background that has no significance. The next thing is this. Now this is more of a large change, and it's handling a couple of different things. And that would be creating a cool to warm pattern here. Also a fill light to non-fill light pattern there, so we have a little more gradation across the scene. I'm also looking at adding more of that cool fill light here, because anywhere in the shadow is going to take on the color of whatever the secondary fill light is. In this scene, that's going to be the tone of the sky. So this tone is what's going to be influencing everything on the shadow side of the image. Just for visual kick, all right? If we're going to have fire coming out of the eyes, then let's utilize that. Let's make it more oomph and make it something that when I pull out of the image, I can still visually read that, and it states something to me even from a little size. And this is where we get to just play with some really nice swirly shapes. And we see that same sort of thing happening up here, right? Look at all these lovely shapes. Now, do you think he needed to use shapes like this on the lava? No. Is that how lava behaves? No. Are they fantastic shapes with a lot of motion in them? Yes. So, artistic license, right? That's what we're going for here. And again, where everything is a gradient. So we're letting this go from like yellow to orange as it goes up, and we're giving a transition there. I did just a little overlay of the feathers. I think we're losing some of the anatomy and the precision of the rendering of the anatomy and the feather structure, so I did a little overlay that. Obviously, you would manually paint it, but I'm trying to save time. So that would be kind of what I'm thinking. Just kind of quick on off is that's sort of the magic difference, right? And in the background, the tornadoes aren't really doing that much. They can be there, but I may give some like a building or something for them to interact with, so that I have some sense of scale on the background. Otherwise, I have no sense of scale. And then you could also use planes of shadow and planes of smoke in order to create a sense of depth. Because right now we don't have that much. We just kind of have very generic kind of, spots like this. Little triangle hills. So I tried to go a little more nuanced, a little more specific with that. Okay. And then like this would be another way. This is like if you want to lean into the cooler shadow thing. It's a little different. And using the warm glow mainly just on the bottom side of it. Yeah. There you go. Okay. Any questions that I missed? Guys have any questions? Feel free to drop them here. Otherwise, otherwise we're done. That's all the reviews. Yeah. Wasn't there another contestant? The first one of the review. Oh no, that's just the announcements page. Put it in that folder. The first one of the first review. I think you're talking about that. New challenge released next week. My schedule is pretty packed next week, so I am not committing to a time until I have a better idea of when it would actually take place. I do have write-ups of what the topics would be for a next time. New challenge. No, I mean last times. Well, not everybody sends images in every time. So if somebody doesn't send it in, we don't review it. Yeah, I have some more theme challenges. One of the most popular challenges we did last year was the Hasori character challenges. And that's where you guys were creating the Hasori race. of the people with the dark skin and the golden designs on them, and they were like the nomadic desert people that used to be servants of the gods. And so I have another one kind of outlined that follows that. It's a different race. I think you'd find it pretty cool. Could be have an environment next time as an option. Yeah, I like that idea. I like combining the idea of you can choose like an environment or a people. And I was really glad people got into this one. I know characters are like the most popular subject for the community to do with the challenges. So I was hopeful that you guys would still be interested in something that had like a crow and and just an object. But you know, it came through really good, and you guys created some wonderful images, and that is part of being an illustrator, right? You don't always get to do your favorite subject, and the more versatile you are with what you can do, the more desirable you are to a client. I'm going to go to the crow afterwards. Good. Environment would be great. Definitely the crow was cool. Loves the bees. Yeah, thanks so much. Make sure we're tuning in next week, and we'll be taking a look at the finals for Group 2. But otherwise, that wraps it up for this time. We're clocking in just about 2 hours. Thanks so much for spending time here with me. And stay connected. Hop out on the Discord or the Facebook group as well. And until then, keep drawing.